Hi everyone, I'm glad that you're here today at Humans of Authenticity. My name is Villy and I am your host. Our guest today is Clayonia Colbert-Dorsey, who is a trusted confidant for me every time I need advice and guidance. Clayonia is currently member board of directors of the World Eye Cancer Hope of the US chapter. She's a Dove Scholar, class 2019-21, and that's how I know her. She is also a long-term volunteer of ASAE on various committees. Welcome to Humans of Authenticity, Clayonia. Would you like to introduce yourself to our listeners first?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, V. And first and foremost, I just want to thank you for extending an invitation for me to participate in this, what I believe is a precedent-setting journey that you are on in terms of giving voice to what it means to be authentic. And so I just appreciate your confidence and trust in me and wanting to have me appear on one of your episodes. Thank you so much. Yes, as you've said, Clayonia Colbert-Dorsey, named after my great grandmother. Clayonia is actually a 19th century name. I know people don't meet many Clayonias, but in the 19th century, it was a very popular name. Born and raised in the great state of Maryland. I am the oldest of a family of four, and interestingly, also the oldest grandchild on both sides of my family. I like to include all of the titles, which I think speak to me, because all of that is who I am at core. So, daughter, mother, wife, sister, aunt, cousin. I have worked in the association space for a little over 15 years. Prior to that, I was in academia. And interestingly, I think that that's what started my interest and desire to really engage with and help others by working in the college and university space. I was able to meet so many different people from across the world, which really inspired in me the vision of impact and how we can inspire others by coming together collectively to try and make global good and greater difference. That's what I bring forth from the education space, I think, into my role in associations, which I have found to be the new area where my passion pursuits lie.
Thank you so much for that. I have two follow-up
Absolutely.
questions on that.
Okay.
You mentioned
Okay.
you mentioned that you are the oldest of your siblings, as well as
Yes.
the oldest grandchild on both sides of the family. Can you share how that oldest positions or whether that oldest position has any impact on your way of being and way of thinking?
It most certainly does, V. And
That
it's
way.
interesting that you asked that question. In addition to the many hats that I wear, I am also on the ministry board of my church. And so, as part of Easter celebrations last week, we had a seven last words service, and I was one of the speakers. And part of what I talked about was my family position as being the oldest on all facets, and the fact that I think that it has created in me a sense of perfection to some degree. I am often the one, so I had 10 first cousins. Unfortunately, three of them have passed away. Well, there were 10 of us altogether. So, counting my siblings, myself, and my cousins, there were a total of 10 of us. And I was and still am the person that everyone comes to for advice or for words of wisdom. I am known as the member of the family who carries the history and knows the stories, can at times be the peacemaker. And I think that that aligns with birth order. People do say that the oldest is responsible for those areas. To set tone, set expectations, but also engage democratically for win-wins for all parties.
Now that engage democratically for win-win for both parties, how do you facilitate that amongst the cousins and the siblings? Is there a
Uh,
strategy that you can share with us?
I think First and foremost, it is critical to be a good listener. And I think that my family and friends know me for that. So they feel comfortable in coming and sharing with me, knowing that there will be no judgments. I also think that an important facet of listening is being able to seek clarity. So, particularly when you are trying to have that democratic stance, and as I said, create a win win or seek the best solutions, if there's anything that you are hearing, observing, being told that doesn't necessarily make sense, or you feel that you've only got that outside perspective, really trying to go a bit deeper to gauge further what is creating those reactions or what is creating those responses, the thoughts, the feelings that the person sharing with you is bringing forward. And then sometimes it also involves being the navigator or the collaborator to help opposing sides see the other's view. Often that is half the battle in getting people to realize and agree where the common ground actually lies.
Yeah, I just realized this is a blueprint for anyone who wants to or attempt to become a mediator in our. I think there are so many intricate elements to it. Even the part about
Yes.
seeing the other's view itself is the whole art. Because from my observation, when something happens, there are always three sides to the stories, right? Like
Yes.
my side, your side, and the actual side of the story itself without
Right.
emotion and just pure fact. So thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely. And hearing you say that also, I guess, spurred a different thought for me, V. And it relates actually to a meeting that I had with some folks earlier this week, but talking about generational differences and
Mm.
how they impact engagement. So there are at least two, maybe three generational areas within our family. So we are bringing different perspectives from those points of view. We are also blessed that all of us are along the East Coast, primarily within the DMV, Maryland, Virginia, District of Columbia area. And so we're also very close with each other's children. And so that incorporates even more generational differences. And so everybody knows that I'm the oldest and everybody is coming to me. And just being able to engage all of those moving parts together is an interesting act. But it's all about family. And I'm all about that too. So I enjoy that engagement.
That's really nice. And I can really feel the warmth that you projected each time we're together. And thank you for extending that advice services to me.
Yes.
So go back to your stories that you just shared.
Uh-huh.
What are the three things that you like the most about yourself?
Three things that I like about me. First and foremost, and this goes back to my earliest memories, I consider myself a creative. So, from a very, very young age, I love to read and write. And I wrote stories. And my mother always thought that I was going to be an author. Obviously, I didn't pursue that path because I'm in association management, but I have worked and continue to work in the educational and speaking space. And so I have been able to propel that love for creation into content in terms of presentations that I make and how I am able to add a different twist, perhaps, on the way I deliver programs, workshops, messaging that tends to pull the audience in. And so I think that would perhaps speak to the second trait that I have. I consider myself or believe that it's very important to try to connect with others, to have an empathetic view, because you never really know what people are going through or how what you say may move them, particularly if they are in a chosen session where they've come out to speak with you or seek you out for advice or just wanting to partake of knowledge in some way. So being empathetic And gosh, I guess my third favorite thing would be, and B, you and I have talked about this times that we've been together. I think the fact that I'm a introvert extrovert. So interestingly, a lot of people see me as very outgoing when actually internally I can be a little bit shy and reserved, but you would never guess that because I love fashion and I love wearing things or being seen in things that you're not necessarily going to catch anybody else in. And you and I have had this conversation, or changing up my hair, changing my glasses. So, and that also relates back to the creative side. Yeah. So I think all of those things speak to three of my top picks for what I like about who I am and what it is that I bring to the table.
That's really cool. So let's talk about that connection and the introversion and extroversion.
Yes.
And this is how I connect all the 3 points together.
Okay.
I feel that often the perception is that it's really hard for an introvert to make connection. An introvert cannot be outgoing, and introvert can be very shy, and
Mhm.
introvert doesn't want the attention. So I think these are all of the either the myths or the observations, and that sometimes can become the excuse and becomes the internal struggle for us to get over ourselves and just get out there and just talk to people.
Yes. Right.
So that's my internal thinking about being an introvert.
Well, I think that the myths that you've shared can be self fulfilling prophecy if we allow ourselves to fall into those buckets. And you're right. If I did not push myself to really try to engage, to really try to be seen and heard, I could sit very quietly alone in a corner. Growing up, I recall my mother had concerns about, and she heard from teachers during parent teacher conferences that I was a loner, quote unquote. And that, from the eyes of teachers, conveying that to my mother, to my parents, excuse me, led to some negative connotations. And I don't think that that's necessarily true. I think on some levels, it shows a level of confidence
Mm,
that an introvert has, because it is not unfamiliar to me or uncomfortable for me, even though I'm married and my husband hates this, because to some degree, I'm very independent. So if there's something that I want to do and he doesn't want to do, or even before we were married, if I wanted to go to a play by myself and be in a full opera house sitting alone, I didn't care. I was there and I was looking my finest and my best, which then goes to the extrovert blend that I think we haven't necessarily aligned to the fact that we do want to be heard. We do want to be visible. There is so much that we have to offer. It's giving ourselves the grace and the space to be uncomfortable, or comfortable, I should say, with what it is that internally we're not
mm.
comfortable with, if that makes sense.
Of course, of course. You mentioned those elements become the bucket that we sell
Yes,
ourselves within. So my questions around
right.
that is, in your position, how did you get yourself out of that bucket?
Oh, that is a good question. I think, particularly as I consider how I have come into my roles in the association space. And when did it start? Because I think everything has a connection to some life experience
Mm,
that we have shared. I think realizing that for personal growth, you have to push yourself. And I believe that personal growth requires a lifestyle spectrum approach. So every minute that we have breath in our bodies, I think it's incumbent upon us to try to do something different, to learn something more. And so perhaps just embodying that perspective is what has caused me to run some races I wouldn't. And in saying that concept, I guess I reflect back to when I'm trying to hone in on what perspective led me to this area. Maybe it's, and you and I have talked about this and shared this, that I am a childhood cancer survivor. And when you are a survivor of anything that's required a battle, then you begin to not take life for granted and realize that it is short and it is sweet and you need to make every moment count.
I love that. And I'd love to move on to our keyword very soon because I think we get to that
Okay.
moment. But before I
Okay.
move on, I just want to share another observation. You just remind
Sure.
me that as introverts, we are not that easily to be influenced by peer pressure because you mentioned
Exactly.
that we internalize ourselves enough that we know what we want, and which means that peer pressure is really nothing but something that we don't want to do. So I
I
think,
totally agree. I
yeah,
totally agree. We can be warm or cold, I think. And people are not going to easily read our expressions or what it is that we're really thinking, because I know, at least for me, everything that I am taking in, I am processing and thinking about, okay, what if I do this? Or what if I say this? What is going to be the outcome? How are people going to perceive what it is that I'm saying or doing? So I think you've definitely touched on something there, V.
that's really cool. Thank you. So let's move to the
Absolutely.
keyword conversation. I provided you a list of 12. Which word did you select?
I selected the word hope.
And what does that word speak to you?
When I think of the word hope, it inspires me in a lot of different ways. So I define and think of hope as having faith, of being bold. And when I say bold, I think about President Barack Obama's book, The Audacity of Hope. And audacious is such a powerful word. Relative to myself, I'm kind of like, who is she? Who does she think she is? Hope for me is being on a life journey and knowing that there are many possibilities, twists, and turns on the road that each and every one of us have to take as we go from here to there, and just hoping that the outcomes and the engagements and the people that you meet in the end are all going to mean something that is lasting, because it's what we do that lasts long after we are gone. How people remember us, the impact that we have, the changes and differences that we were able to make are critical, I think, on this life journey.
I guess for me, and I'm being very visualized right here.
Yes.
When I think of the word hope, I'm seeing this little girl, beautiful blue eyes with a lot of sparks in her eyes,
Mm,
with a wing like an angel, just go around listening to our hope, accepting our hope, and then in somehow probably give us the blueprint to realize our hope. And I know this sounds whimsy, but that's how I
whimsy's okay.
see
Whimsy's
hope
all right.
every time
Yes.
I've heard of the word. And I sort of see here when you say talking about hope is much needed in our life journeys in all of the
Yes.
possibility. Was there a time that you lost hope and then somehow you find your way to bring back hope into your life?
Hmm. Hmm. I would say yes, V. And I think that if you pose that question to a variety of individuals, certainly you get different responses. But I think being human exposes us to a variety of emotions and thoughts and feelings. And so I think that many of us at times, for various reasons, lose hope. There have been a number of instances where I have lost hope. I think as a woman of color, as a childhood cancer survivor, probably one of the most difficult things for me was, and we were talking earlier, that my daughter just had a baby. And after I had her, and she came 7 weeks early, she was born at 33 weeks. Didn't know that I was a high risk pregnancy. She comes into the world, which speaks to kind of how the rest of her life is going to be in terms of the way in which she engages and interacts. But I wanted to have more children after her. And my husband and I had 3 more pregnancies, all of which resulted in second trimester losses. So I
Oh,
had a boy, a girl, and another boy after her. And each time I would get pregnant again and I'd get through the first trimester, I had that hope and that excitement. We're having another baby. We're bringing another life into the world. And then you get halfway there and something unexpectedly happens and you lose that child. The hope is crushed. After each one of those losses, it was very difficult for me to be able to pick up and go on and still have hope and belief in the world. But I realized for the children that I did have, I had to keep going. And in order to maintain my sanity, I had to keep going and do so with a hope and a belief. And this speaks to my faith and my worldview that those losses were for a reason, and I may not understand it at this particular point in time, particularly while I was in the midst of the grieving, but it was a lesson needed to learn, or a gift that I needed to take in order to further develop something that at some point in life I could go on and give to others. And so there have been opportunities now in life when, going back to the importance of family, there have been younger family members who have gone through the loss of a child, just as my husband and I've had to, and I've been able to share not necessarily the wisdom, but being able to truly let them know, I feel your pain because I've experienced it. I know how difficult it is. Don't give up. Don't lose hope. I said earlier that as long as we have breath in our bodies, we should be learning something. People might think that it sounds trite, that it doesn't really hold meaning or value, but I believe that it does, that as long as we have breath in our body, we have to have that same value for the possibility of hope and what that means and how things can change, sometimes on a dime.
there's just so much wisdom that you packed into that. And I hear you. On one hand, hope is this beautiful thing that we need
Yes,
to drive us through hardship.
right.
Then on the other hand, comes with hope. There is, I also hear your loss and all the griefs,
Yes,
all the sufferings. And I can't help but thinking, do they have to go hand in hand? And that is such an abstract question.
it definitely is. Hearing you say that makes me think about vulnerability. And we have to be willing to allow ourselves to be vulnerable. That's risk taking. And everything that we do in life is risk taking. I say to people, having gone through my pregnancy journeys and talking to many other women, the fact that any of us are here in this space today, the fact that you and I are even having this opportunity to talk to each other is a miracle when you think about all that can happen, that in an instance life can be taken from the moment of conception. Life can be taken. So it's about risk and not being afraid to take those risks because the possible outcomes are so worthwhile. Applying for jobs, applying for colleges, stepping out on faith and trying to get higher positions, deciding who to marry. All of that is about being vulnerable. And I'm going to go back to my buzzword, hope and possibility, and wanting to not limit yourself from anything that your heart may desire.
Thank you for that. And I will say a brighter side of hope, which is the possibility of the good things that we can potentially have
Yes.
when we don't limit
Yes.
ourselves. And I also pick out on the other important word that you mentioned in this segment, the word allowed ourselves. And I
Mhm.
think that is an important word at the Women's Executive Leadership Forum in Chicago last month. The
Yes, and
keynote
congratulations on
speaker,
your experience there. Yes.
I had the best time. But the keynote speakers also closed her conversation with that sense of permissions. All of a sudden, we as human beings, for some reason, need permission to be happy, need permission to live. And here you are talking about remember to allow ourselves to go through the experience. So I think there are
Yes.
something powerful coming through with all of that train of thought. I want to go back to that brighter side of hope and possibility.
Yes.
What I'm hearing from your story is those possibility becomes the motivation for you to keep your hope going.
That's an honest assessment. I would agree. Definitely. Yes.
Is,
And what choice do I
is,
have? Or what choice do we have? You gotta keep pushing on.
is there a
Right.
stories that you can bring up and share for us around that train of thought?
About self-motivation is what you're referring to, you would say. So I'm gonna date myself in terms of my age. In the African American community, there was the Johnson family and Johnson Family Products and Johnson Family Publications. And they put out Ebony magazine and Jet magazine. And it used to be said every Black family, every African American family in America had a copy of Jet magazine or Ebony magazine on their coffee tables. And my family was no different. I, as I said earlier, was born and raised in Maryland, Western Maryland, the panhandle, right on the border of West Virginia and Pennsylvania. And so there were not many people who looked like me in that space. And that's a challenge, and that's a story for another time. But being in the minority, there were majority standards for beauty, for acceptance, for credibility, that because there weren't a lot of people that looked like me, I had to search out to really find that and to make connections. And so I remember having those ebony books, magazines, the Jet magazines, and being able just to flip through the pages and to see beauty in many shades, in many hues, in many different family roles and walks of life, really at a young age, served to motivate me and say, you are worthy and there is beauty and this is how you can play it up. So I still like books. I still like physical books and flipping through the pages, I think, because it takes me back to those memories where I was making very important connections to my worth and my value through those pages. And that is what motivated me to not take a seat, not sit back, not question my worth, but to find ways in which to be expressive. And maybe that relates back also to how I'm the introvert who also straddles the line to extrovert, because if I was going to survive in that environment and attain in that environment, I had to push the boundaries.
That feels very, very motivated. There's one piece of that stories that I want to unpack a bit more. So you say
Okay.
you got up to the point where it's motivated you enough. So you allow yourself not to take a seat, not to sit back, and not to question your own worth.
Yes.
My questions
Yes.
around that was, do you remember the first time you allow yourself to not question your own worth? Can you
Ooh,
share that moment with us?
wow. Oh, B, you have some really great, powerful questions. Wow. First time.
Or the
Gosh.
time that you remember the most that make the
Um,
impact on you?
I think perhaps the very first time would be, I guess I'm gonna spin it perhaps to a little later in life and spin it from a professional perspective. And it was, and this is very early on in my career, but I was offered a particular position and I felt that I got a low ball salary offer. And even though I was new in a career, I realized that that salary that you have offered me diminishes my worth and what you think it is that I bring into this organization as someone who you want to partner with you in growing the organization further. And so I was absolutely adamant in standing up for myself and why, if you want me to come in, then we need to have some different discussion about the starting salary. And that happened particularly at a point in time where now it's very commonplace that people are having open and honest discussions about salary and pushing back and challenging that, no, I can't come on board with you for that amount. So I feel like I was a little bit ahead of the game with that. And
Done.
it was outside what would be my typical comfort zone. But yeah, I was like, no, I've got to speak up and say something because I was very much interested in the role and wanted to accept the role, but I knew that I couldn't take it at what was on the table. So therefore, let's try to have a meeting of the minds and see what happens.
Can you share the outcomes of that conversation with us?
Oh, they increased the salary. And I started the position.
And
Yes, engaged happily. Yes.
it's
Again, vulnerability and stepping out and having that hope that anything is possible. Yeah.
you
And I
know,
stayed there for years, if that was your next question. I stayed there for a number of years because the journey was worth it.
that's really nice. I'm glad
Yeah.
that you have a happy ending for that stories. And I think this is
Yes.
very hopeful because I'm seeing the transformations from your stories, from the point
Uh-huh.
that you took a step back, a sit back, trying to understand the power of being an introvert, going through that
Yes.
internal thinking, and then able to stay firm on your ground and speak up. So again, I think this
Right.
is another blueprint for any of us who want to make a
Yes.
difference and who want to do something differently so that we can get to a better possibility for things for us.
Absolutely agree. Absolutely agree. And it's can be easier said than done. It's not something that we are always prepared to do, but unless you push yourself, you don't know what you are capable of and the perhaps positive outcome that it can have in the end.
Thank you for that. There are a lot of motivational elements in the stories that you just shared with me, and thank you again for that. We
Absolutely.
are moving to the last part of the conversation soon. Is there anything
Okay.
else you'd like to touch on hope before we move on? Or any other stories or any other examples?
I mean, I have a lot of stories and a lot of examples. No, I think we're going on a good flow. unless you have a question that spurs one of those stories, I'm okay with carry forward, my friend.
I do want to go back before we move on to the last part. So,
Okay.
congratulations again on your newborn grandsons of 6 weeks.
Yes, Maddox
Um,
Christopher. Yes.
so when you met him for the first time, is there any hope that you have for him? Is there any
Oh,
hopeful feelings that you have for him that you can
oh,
share with us?
ooh, V. Wow. There's a lot for me to share there. So I wanted to be at the hospital. My daughter and her husband wanted to have their personal bonding experience with their baby. They just wanted the two of them to be at the hospital. So I reluctantly agreed. I was teasing my daughter. I said, I don't care if I am not in the hospital, I'll be sitting in the parking lot. And she had him the end of January. Oh, it was like, okay, well, it's kind of cold outside. I don't know if I'm going to be sitting in a car on the parking lot in January. So I met him initially through pictures immediately after his birth. Then
Okay.
I was telling a story that the cord was wrapped around his neck. And each time my daughter had a contraction, his heart rate would go down. So there was lots of medical interventions that were happening. They thought, didn't even consider the possibility of cesarean. So it was not actually until he was delivered that they saw that the cord was wrapped around his neck. I was at a conference in Florida 2 weeks ago. And so, of course, I was sharing pictures of the baby and sharing his journey to get here. And one of my friends said, he wanted to live. The birth trauma and the cord issues and the heart rate deceleration, he knew he needed to be here in this world. He wanted to be here in this world, which goes back to when I saw him in pictures, I was like, oh, he looks like a little old man. And now when people see him too, everyone is, oh, he looks like an old soul. Oh, he seems so wise. And he always gives the appearance of being very contemplative. His little hands he has folded in front of him, and he's got these big, but my husband has green eyes, and Maddox's eyes are vacillating between blue or green. We can't really tell what color they're going to be, but he's got these big, beautifully colored eyes, and he doesn't bat, and he just kind of looks at you. And so when I think of him, and I'm going to get emotional and start crying, but that is the embodiment of hope. His path to get here wasn't easy. He is only here in this world, and my daughter is only here in this world because my parents had the hope. I was diagnosed with my cancer at the age of 2.5, and my parents, my mother in particular, realized that there was something that was not right with me, and she pursued multiple doctors before she got the diagnosis of your child has cancer, and this is what the cancer is, and it's a very rare cancer. If my parents had not had that hope, if they had not made the treatment decisions that they did, I would not be here. My daughter would not be here, and Maddox would not be here. And he is the legacy for the future. And so I take hope in that.
And thank you so much for bringing hope into our discussion on my channel. I really appreciate the stories.
Absolutely.
It's
Like I
really
said, I
powerful
did not get
and
misty with this.
it is really powerful and it's
It is.
yeah.
Oh, it's like a therapy session, V. I'm serious.
Thank
Oh
you.
my goodness.
Thank you so much for that. So
Absolutely.
moving to the last part of the conversation, what's next for you in the
Uh-huh.
coming 12 months?
So a really exciting thing that I am looking forward to is World Eye Cancer Hope USA is the convener for our biannual One Retinoblastoma World Conference. It is held internationally every
Nice.
2 years. USA was supposed to host right before the pandemic hit. And of course, pandemic came and everything shut down and went to virtual. We were determined to go live this year, and it is going to be held in Honolulu, Hawaii.
Nice.
So Hawaii has always been on my bucket list. So I am very excited and looking forward to being able to bring folks together from across the globe to celebrate our mission and to connect survivors, families. It's a very unusual conference. It's one of the only few in the world where you are bringing survivors and families together with the medical professionals who treat the disease. And it is truly a colloquium, collaborative of discussion about what is the future and what are the impacts that we want to drive for the coming generations of persons who are going to be diagnosed with generation and making their lives and their journey easier. So that's coming up. I am looking forward to just how I am able to engage and grow professionally. There are different things in the works that I can't fully talk about right now, but I'm looking forward to what the possibility of those opportunities are. I also have a vision. My grandfather was a Tuskegee Airman,
Right.
and I am committed to keeping his legacy and his values, a lot of life lessons learned from him, keeping that alive. And so, coupling that with my association experience, my family and I are in dialogue about how perhaps we can start a family foundation and or a nonprofit entity. So, yeah, that's the next 12 months, the things that are putting fires under me, but in a good way, not in a negative way right now.
That sounds exciting.
And
Time
I'm still
now.
misty, V, about talking about all of it. Okay, I'm together. I'm together.
That sounds really exciting, and hopefully you also building a lot of time to spend with your newborn grandsons as well.
I hope so. They live like an hour away from me, which is really not a big deal, but I feel like it. I have a 2-year-old grandson, and they just live right across the street. So anytime I want to see him and I need some hugs and kisses and baby love, I can just walk across the street, which is different than having to get in the car and physically drive to Maddox. But yeah, all worth it.
That's really nice.
Yes.
So we're getting to the last question of the conversation,
Okay.
and hopefully this is a fun one.
Okay.
So, if you were going on your dream vacation tomorrow,
Oh,
what is the one item you would take with you and why?
oh, V. This is a good, funny one. I think that I would definitely have to take a camera. I am very much into the visual memories. If you talk to somebody in my family, they'll tell you, particularly on my iPhone, that I'm a picture hoarder. And my daughter's like, Mom, you just take terrible pictures. But I want to capture and live in every moment. So to capture the beauty that exists, to trigger memories of the moment, I think that pictures do that. So I'd need to have my kid. Yes.
That's really nice, really nice. This is really
Yes.
the end of our episode, and thank you again for your time and sharing your story with me and the audience today.
Thank you so much, V. It has been a very, very thought provoking and engaging opportunity to be authentic, which I realize your podcast is all about. And I think that you are paving the way and showing to others that it's okay to truly walk authentically as we are and as we engage. So thank you so much.
I appreciate the feedback. That's it for today's episode. Drop your thoughts in the comment section. I'd love to hear your take on the chosen keyword. Have a lovely time, and thank you again for spending time with Humans of Authenticity.